And action! Welcome along to another Filming and Fettling episode. This one's filming behind the scenes with Tom Cunliffe aboard HMS Medusa. If you haven't seen this film before, pop over to Tom's channel, the link's in the description below. Watch it there, then pop back here, where I'm going to talk about all the details when we went aboard this World War II vessel, which has some amazing things on board. So here's Medusa ploughing along on the edge of the Solent, the needles in the background. I didn't actually shoot these images. They were supplied by Alan Watson, who is in charge of Medusa. And jolly nice they are. As you can see, good shot here from the stern. It's a bit rock and rolly.
Opposite Portsmouth, in Portsmouth Harbour.
And we move swiftly along to Tom, standing on the dock. And this is the intro that Tom always likes to do. He's holding a rather large shell. Bit of rain on the lens, and not easy to film into the wind and not get rain on the lens. Always try and point the camera downwind if it's raining, or across the wind. And if you've got a matte box, that makes all the difference. It helps keep that rain off, especially if it's got a flag, French flag, which is the little flappy bit which hinges on the top of the matte box. Good for keeping rain off the lens. Also, have a hanky in your back left-hand pocket or somewhere on you. You can quickly wipe the lens and get that rain off. But we persevere. Here's some cutaways of Medusa while Tom's talking about it. He likes to do a little preamble before he goes aboard.
And they've got real ex-Royal Navy guys on here doing the work as well.
There's that rain on the lens again, never mind.
So she's a great thing, a wonderful institution, a great British vessel. And I'm going to go on board now and have a chat with Alan. So let's get cracking.
So we go aboard Medusa, and there's a few establishing shots here just to bridge the gap, get us on board. So gives Tom plenty of time to climb aboard and go into the wheelhouse, where he's going to meet up with Alan, who is the chap that looks after Medusa and operates her. So here he is meeting Alan. Now, when you're filming something like this, it's a bit tricky because there's basically several ways you can do it. The way I've done it here is in a wide shot, so you can see both the individuals taking part in the conversation. They've each got a microphone on, which you really need to do. You couldn't really shoot something like this on a single microphone unless you had somebody panning the mic between the mouths. But even then, it's rather tricky because you never quite know who's going to talk next and what they're going to say and where to point the mic, unless you've got a very experienced sound operator. But I'm assuming you're going to be filming something like this by yourself. So 2 mics, 1 on each, really gets you in the game.
Depth charges on the
depth charges, as dig equipment, so we've got the ability to detect a submarine.
We started off in the wide shot, but really need to get a single on Alan at some point so we can put a name caption up for him. So here's the single shot, and there's the name caption. And that just introduces Alan, so we know who he is and what his role aboard the boat is.
Vessel. So they were used for everything imaginable, but this one had a very specific...
You'll notice he's lit, and there's a cutaway of Tom, and Tom's face is lit. If I didn't have a top light on here, what would happen? You've got very bright outside behind, and a face facing away from the light. You're going to get the face in shadow, so you want to try and put some light in the face to stop it from becoming a silhouette, basically.
Thinking about the minefield until the very last moment.
You can't believe they got...
So we've had the single of Alan there. There's a cutaway. That's a non-sync cutaway. I filmed that later, so you can pop that shot in as a cutaway any way you like, as long as the mouths and the hands are relatively in sync. So, for instance, so you wouldn't put that wide shot in while Alan was talking in the close shot if Tom was talking in the wide shot, because it just wouldn't look right. So you need a shot where Tom's listening in the wide shot.
During the night, the minesweepers...
So here we are, still on the single.
...channel through that led into Omaha.
This is handheld. You need to be mobile to do this, because to keep viewer interest, at some point Tom's going to speak, so we're going to back out into a wide shot. In fact, there it is. And it just keeps the interest level up. And in fact, Tom's an integral piece of the film. It's more of a conversation between the two rather than an interview with Alan. So Tom's going to have some interesting things to say, so it's nice to see him say those. Not having a second camera means that anything that Tom says where we're framed up on Alan means that you're not going to see Tom saying it. Afterwards, pick up some reversal shots, in other words, shots of Tom listening, and get him to ask the same questions again. But that means that you need to remember what the questions are. And if there's a lot of questions during a 20-minute interview, you can often forget. So useful to make notes in your head while you're filming of any absolutely essential questions being asked while you're actually filming.
And even looking at this chart room, when you look at it from outside, it's not much of a radar target, is it really?
Not at all. No, we have to do something about it these days to make sure we are visible.
Now listen, Alan, you know, we've got
that thing in the background, which you can see, which actually looks a bit like a motorbike, is actually the windscreen wipers, if you like. There's obviously a nautical technical term which I'm not privy to, and that's the round bits of the window rotate and are wiped off as they go round. But it looks like a motorbike or a bicycle.
They were trained for it, they did it, and they did it every day.
When you're filming something like this, you know, your mind wanders off sometimes and you're thinking about what's going to happen next, what the next setup is going to be, where we're going to be filming. Your mind's always darting ahead to gather your thoughts as to what's going to happen next.
And the electronics on board were so secret that she was also bung full of explosives. And the instruction was, if there's any chance of you being captured, you blow the ship.
Alan's a really nice chap. He was very accommodating and really interesting chap as well. The stories he's got to tell are breathtaking, and he's lived through a lot of things himself. So he was a great interview.
Officers went ashore. They went into Weymouth to the cinema, as it happens, and they were briefed with all the other officers as to what they were going to do. They came back again, and after that the ship was sealed. Nobody ashore, nobody on board. And then right at the very last
There's a good cutaway of Tom listening. Need lots of cutaways because even though the interview goes on for about 20 minutes, we can't put all of that in because it would just lose viewer interest. You'd just get a bit fed up of it all. So we put the more interesting things in, and then you'll find shots of Tom listening, which helps break up the bits we filmed of Alan. Just makes it a better use of time when you're watching.
They were peacetime leisure sailors. Had been put in uniform.
The cutaways of Tom were done afterwards. We're filming this on a single camera. If we had the luxury of two cameras, it'd be great because I could get a shot of Alan talking and somebody else could get a shot of Tom listening, and then wouldn't have to get any cutaways of any kind after. We'd just use the two shots and intercut them wherever needed. And that is done sometimes when we've got a very set interview that's been set up beforehand. We can do that, get a couple of cameras, but on this occasion it's just what the BBC call PSC, Portable Single Camera.
From Milford Haven, so he'd got some sea experience.
Yeah.
Most of the rest hadn't.
And this is where they stood?
Yeah.
Off the beaches of Normandy?
Yeah.
So we've got some archive library stills which Alan provided here of some of the crew from Medusa from days gone by, and more shots of Medusa that Alan provided. If you filmed these shots, put a comment below the video and it'd be great to acknowledge you, as I've got no idea who filmed this footage.
8 people lived in this space. And,
so here we are down below inside the forward part of the boat. It was really cramped to get down there. The companionway was really tight, so having to squeeze down there and bring the kit down as well, it just took forever.
Yeah, they still do that on submarines, I think.
They do.
Yeah.
The boat's made of wood, so lots of creaking as it rocks gently in Gosport where she's based. And you can see Tom and Alan sat there having a chat, and it's rather bright behind Tom. I've got a light panel on a clamp which I've clamped to something behind Tom, and in retrospect I probably wouldn't have put it there because Tom's hair, being very white, sort of merges into the background, but it lights things nicely, just lifts everything so we've got some detail. You really need to take a small light with you wherever you go because it just becomes invaluable. You don't know where you're going to film down a small dark alleyway or
Below our feet, below the
inside
table here, is
against
the
bright light behind, a light comes in really, really useful.
explosives stored down there.
If the light was on top of the camera, then yes, it could work, but it becomes very flat when you've got the light directly on top of the camera. You really need it off to one side and lighting areas of interest, which in this case are the two chaps talking. This is all handheld. I think I was sat or squished into a seat on the end here, and I probably had the camera on my knee, just trying to hold it steady. Even though the boat is not at sea, it's in the harbour, at the dockside, gently rocking. It's still a bit cramped.
He would, yeah.
Fire it up in the morning for the tea and
Yep.
yeah.
And the coal stove was the only source of hot water down here. So if you wanted a head-to-toe wash...
Nice to get just a nice wide shot of them talking. It was almost impossible to get too close here. I'd have to squish right next to Tom, sat down to get the shot of Alan. And that means that whenever Tom's talking, I wouldn't be able to jimmy all the way along the bench again smoothly to get the two shot. I don't think there was much headroom in there, so it was a bit tricky. But I decided that just a nice wide two shot was going to suffice for this bit, because it's the tales and the stories that they're telling which are of critical importance here.
I don't know what we were like, Alan, but you know, it was all right for those of us on board, and I guess it was the same for these lads, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And
beautiful inside this boat. I mean, you can smell the wood just by looking at the shots.
It rained at 3 o'clock every afternoon and stopped at 10 past. And so 5 to 3, we'd all be out on deck with our soap on the rope, and you just had to get rid of the suds before the rain stopped.
So meanwhile, out on deck, there's Alan putting the gun sight on.
Fire, the sort of ammunition I was examining earlier.
And Tom narrating a bit here. So Tom wrote some appropriate words and sent me them after, and we dropped them in. That's VO, voiceover, a bit like what I'm recording now.
That's it, that goes forward.
What I'm curious about, Alan, is how you actually con the vessel, because...
So here we are on the bridge, Alan at the controls, and Tom casually stood there, one leg up, nice and relaxed. And again, we've got the two separate mics on them, and outside now, so really having to take care with wind noise on mics. If it's really windy, then I tend to put the mics on the inside of a piece of clothing, like the pullover or the fleece that Alan's wearing. But putting a mic on the inside can muffle the sound, and you lose all the detail of the sound. Even though you can hear what they're saying, it's not brilliant. So always try and keep the mic outside of clothing. And you'll know a lot of people like to put these very furry wind gags on mics. Personally, I don't like them, because you're looking at the wind gag and not listening to what somebody's saying. It just becomes a blot on the landscape. So for me, I'd always use a small, hard wind gag. I've actually got two on these. So there's a built-in wind gag, and then there's an extra one on top. But they're so small you can't even see them. And just judicious placing in the lee of the wind is what you want. So you'll notice the wind's coming from behind Tom, from camera right. And that's great, because Tom's body's blocking the wind from his mic. And I'm not sure exactly where I placed Alan's mic, but it's probably tucked just inside his collar.
But realistically, it's about 5. They are pretty good.
But that 5 seconds, if you're counting that out, that would seem like a long time if something was coming up in front of you, wouldn't it?
Well, you only have to look ahead of us and see the little...
Again, handheld, so we pan around when there's something of interest mentioned. Just gives us the flexibility to look at what they're talking about. And when there's some detail needed, rather than zoom into the detail, it will use cutaways.
You haven't got infinite engine control of speed either,
No.
so what...
So when Tom was talking about the hand controls, and we see a shot, a close-up of the hand control, the throttle control down there, that's a cutaway, which we've picked up later. In the after the interview is finished, I've got some shots of the things that Tom and Alan were talking about. and then I can use them as edit points. So when we're shortening the interview, I can put a cutaway in of, say, the throttle control.
It will do it a lot of harm.
I'm down in the engine room now, the heart of the ship, standing between two, well, massive Gardners, which are the, to me, the doyen of the marine engine. And I'm talking here...
This is a very, very cramped space, and you can tell because I'm sort of literally squished into a corner, and I can't remember if I've got the camera on my shoulder or I'm holding it. I suspect I'm holding it halfway down, or it might even be resting on something. And it's just in a wide angle here between Tom and Ed, the chief engineer. And in retrospect, if I'd had a mirrorless camera, a small mirrorless camera at the time, I would have taken that on board and I would have used the small mirrorless camera down in the engine room. It would just make so much more sense. Trouble with big shoulder cameras is they're great because they're nice and steady in most situations, but in very cramped conditions, like this engine room or, say, the cockpit of a small aircraft, they are literally impossible to swing about. So here we've got some cutaway stills, which were supplied by Alan after the filming took place. So we were able to see things like propellers and the underside of the boat, the hull.
Yes.
And what sort of maintenance schedule do you have with them?
We do tappets, injectors.
And some detailed cutaways here. Tom nodding and shots of the engine. And then Tom asks if he can have a listen to the engines and gets Ed to start one of the engines. And of course, you need some nice, clean sound of that, and then use it to feature the sound. Music to Tom's ears.
Oh, that's beautiful, isn't it? It's so quiet.
It's so quiet.
Starboard 30.
Meanwhile, back up on the flying bridge, and we've got Alan and his helm, and just going through some of the maneuvers and actions that take place aboard the flying bridge as Alan gives a demonstration. So just breaks it up nicely so we can see exactly what it might look like when Medusa is at sea. So here we are again, back in the Solent or thereabouts. I'm guessing because some of the earlier shots were going past the Needles, so more astute viewers may identify some of these bits of shoreline and headlands, but used that shot earlier. It's quite a nice shot actually, even though it's a bit bouncy. Just breaks it up nicely and gets us back into the harbour and back aboard Medusa.
Well, we're a couple of grown-up navigators, Alan. We're both old enough to have been through the whole revolution, aren't we?
And we're back in the wheelhouse again. And in fact, we don't film these sequences in the order that they're edited together. We film them in a chronological order, obviously, in an ergonomical order. So we were in the wheelhouse for some time, and we did all the filming in there. Then we moved to below deck somewhere, did all the filming there. Then we moved to the engine room, did all the filming there. Then we moved outside, did all the filming there. So rather than show those sequences in the order they were filmed, you show them in an order which relates best to the story that you're telling. So here we're back inside the wheelhouse because Alan's explaining about some of the more technical equipment aboard the boat and some of the stuff that was used especially during World War II. And if you've watched this film over on Tom's channel already, you'll know it's absolutely fascinating about the sonar and the ASDIC systems that they've got on board. These are real groundbreaking technology back in the 1940s, and it's great to hear Alan so enthusiastic when he describes this stuff. He's literally a kid in a toy shop, and that's the real story here. is Alan's enthusiasm for what he has around him. That comes across really well in the film, and that's something you don't really need to work on. It happens naturally, and all you have to do is make sure that you can see and hear what he's saying nice and cleanly, and the story comes out.
It was actually used operationally for the very first time on D-Day.
No.
It was developed in Canada.
Again, we're handheld here in the wide shot. The camera's on the shoulder, and the light is actually on the top of the camera, and that becomes a bit of a problem if you're using a shoulder-mounted camera and you've got a top light on there, and it's better to have the top light as high as possible away from the camera, a good foot at least. The problem is that with limited headroom, it's just impossible to have it on your shoulder and have the light that high, so the light will be in a squished down mode right above the lens. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the light here is really useful because you've got bright daylight outside and a face inside which needs lighting up. And you can see that the daylight outside is almost washed out. It's really high level there. Really, I could do with a much brighter light, and then I can stop the lens down and we can match the outside daylight with the light on Alan's face. In practice, not really possible because you need such a bright light, and the problem there is, of course, that Alan or any interviewee is going to be literally blinded and difficult for them to see. They start squinting and complaining about the light. It doesn't do much good for anybody. So there's a nice balance to be had. And here I think it's probably about as good as we're going to get it. Fortunately, there's things on the windows break up the vast swathes of white daylight outside reflecting off buildings and water. Plus, if you keep the camera moving like this from wide shot to medium shot of Alan, and it just helps things along nicely.
I managed to make sure that it didn't go on the scrap heap, and it's in the Royal Navy Museum now.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, what about the Decca?
The Decca, yeah. We're very fortunate to have...
This is it, is it?
This is it. This is
There's a cutaway of some of the gear they're talking about. Fascinating stuff that it is. I can't believe that Alan bought this stuff off eBay. Just unbelievable.
But they're all the same anyway.
Yeah, they're exceptionally rare. As far as I know, there's only 2 other dials that exist. And the way this worked was you have a paper chart that goes with
One of the issues with filming with Tom, and it's not a bad thing at all, but he wears glasses for looking at things close up, reading glasses. And those glasses pop on and pop off at will. They've got a mind of their own. And 1 minute Tom's wearing them and the next he's not. And filming cutaways later with Tom, I've got to get the glasses on. Can you take them off? Can you put them on again? Can you hold them in your hands? Can you twiddle them about? And so any cutaways we get match with the shots, the sync shots, the shots we're filming. Sync as in synchronized, SYNC. It's what you call any shot where there's synchronized sound with it. It comes from the old filming days where you didn't necessarily have sound recorded at the same time as you were filming. But any sound that was called sync sound because it was in sync with the images. So if you hear me refer to sync sound, that's actuality sound as recorded in the camera. So you notice the glasses have disappeared for a bit. I don't know where they've gone. They've probably off to get a cup of tea and they'll be back. But they will reappear, and Tom will have them on again in a sec. But in this instance, I don't think I needed too many cutaways of Tom because we've got plenty of cutaways of the kit that they're talking about.
Yes.
Nobody else bid on it. 99p, mine. So,
if I had needed some cutaways of Tom, I did get them later, and I probably forgot to ask him to put the glasses on at one point. So if I need cutaways while Tom's got the glasses on, I would have had to use a cutaway of the instruments and stuff that they're looking at and talking about.
Back he came and said, well, I was disappointed, but I'm not now. Would you like the other dial and the backing plate?
Oh.
And he kindly donated to the ship.
Oh,
and
brilliant.
So it's come home.
So this is a slightly different sequence looking aft now, in the wheelhouse still. We just turned around while they're studying the charts. And again, there's several ways to film something like this because you need to see what they're looking at, what they're talking about. But you also need to see them. This would be great for two camera operators to film this sequence.
It's hyperbolic navigation is called.
But sadly, it's just me, so we need to somehow listen to Alan's story and illustrate it with things that he's talking about, without having the viewer wander off. Got to try and keep it interesting and relevant, but simultaneously allow time for what he's saying to sink in.
From one station and then from another station and into.
So one of the ways to do this is the way I've done it, and that is basically just a busket. So I'm on the shoulder, there's the wide shot. We see Alan, we see Tom, and we see the chart. And at some point we need to see what they're talking about. And that's either done during the filming, so at some point I will literally swoop in and zoom in to look at what they're talking about, or there's a cutaway of Tom listening, or I will get shots like this which might have been filmed later or at the time. It's just trying to keep a balance. For something like this you probably cut for sound. In other words, you're filming what they're talking about, and later in the edit, rather than edit the footage by looking at what's going on, you're listening to the words and you're telling the story that way, almost cutting it as if it's radio. And then afterwards you're looking to drop the shots in that best illustrate what the words are saying. Very tricky to do, but and does take some time, but not impossible, and it's actually quite fun. And if you can do it in a fluid, seamless manner, then it makes it all the more pleasant to watch and all the more enjoyable to edit.
And guiding the ships through there. Did the vessel come home?
Yeah, once she had completed her 30 hours on station, her orders were to return to Portsmouth. She was equipped as a navigational leader, so she was used over the next weeks for guiding convoys across. One of the convoys...
So we're listening to Alan now talking about some of the experiences of the boat around D-Day and how she went across the channel and nearly didn't come back. And there we've got Tom again, listening. Don't know where the glasses are. They're back in the pocket now, I think.
Destroyed in the storm. And Doug tells the story of having to go close into Omaha Beach at about D+1, and really makes you think, because he said they went fairly close in. They launched the dinghy in order to go ashore. They were running short of supplies, and they went to see what they could get. And he said all along the line of the surf was black, and they couldn't quite understand what this was about until they got close. And the whole black line along the beach was bodies.
Goodness me.
And all these years later, then you could see the tears start to go down his cheeks as he told this story.
Gracious.
Yeah, some things, you're listening to this while you're filming and you try and keep the shot steady, you're thinking about all the technical aspects, but you're hearing stuff which is really heavy, and you can be affected by it. I remember years ago filming in a school where there was a remembrance service for a student that had been killed walking out from behind a bus, unfortunately. And I was fairly young at the time, must have been in my 20s. And there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And my problem with not having a dry eye is that when you're filming on the tripod and the tripod's fairly low level, you're looking down into the lens, into the viewfinder, and the tears just drip off your eyes and into the viewfinder, and you then can't see what you're filming. So useful to have that hanky in the back pocket, not only for keeping rain off the lens, but for wiping the viewfinder occasionally. So yeah, that was quite sobering to hear. And these things happen, you're filming, and in situations like this, you never know what's going to come out. You have to sort of be prepared for anything. You get used to it after a while, but the stories are quite interesting and can be literally breathtaking.
With 15 apprentices, and did the job ourselves. And so pretty much we took the ship out of the water, put a big...
So while Alan was talking about the refit of Medusa, I got in touch with him during the edit and said, look, can I have some shots of the refit, please? Because that would be great to paste those over so we can actually see what you're talking about. So he kindly sent me some shots of Medusa out of the water with all the bits and pieces needed to put it back together again, which was obviously a rather large job. It's always great to be able to see things like this using moving images, and in this day and age everybody's got phones and they'll take some shots. The problem with phone shots is the frame rates and the resolution isn't going to necessarily match what you're shooting, so you've got a lot of footage to convert sometimes, and that can take up a lot of time. And you can see here I've varied the wide angle shot of them talking. I was probably getting tired by this time and the camera slipped down maybe.
Jets of water when you were at sea. And so after a lot of thought, what we did was went from 2 layers to 3, albeit the same thing.
And here's Alan describing some of the more technical aspects of rebuilding the boat, which is great because, you know, a lot of people are interested in that sort of thing, and it would have been easy to cut it out and thinking maybe that's a bit too boring. But I tend to leave these things in because there's always somebody who will be interested in some of the absolute detail. So yeah, I'm happy to leave that in. And in fact, with all the stuff that Alan came out with, I've left virtually all of it in. So it's good to be able to get that level of detail.
It is quite literally a time capsule, but all the fittings that you see, they came off before we started the restoration.
Yeah, so they really are what they appear to be.
Individually being sorted out, repaired, and gone back again. So they all belong to the boat, they've all gone back. But if praise is due, it's...
Relaunching. Would have been lovely to see that in person and get some footage, but you can't be present for everything.
Finish, which looks authentic 1940s paint finish. Yeah. One or two enthusiastic people have said you've even managed to duplicate the paint runs that they would have had with a non-skilled painter.
You might have noticed the camera is moving a bit there. It's because I was laughing, trying to keep it nice and steady, but when you get some funny anecdotes, it's difficult to sometimes keep the camera steady.
Thanks very much to you and the boys and the Medusa Trust for making it happen.
So there's Tom signing off on another one, and we're back outside on the edge of the Solent, and time to let the credits roll. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments and I'll do a Q&A video at some point. And if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. Thanks for watching.